12 years. That's how long Thorne Shepherd had lived alone in the canyon. No trails led to his cabin. No maps marked this place. Just rock, wind, and the silence he'd learned to cherish like an old friend. Each morning, he drank his coffee in the same weathered chair, watching the mist crawl through the canyon walls like ghosts with nowhere else to go. Thorne had built this life on purpose. A life without visitors, without voices, without pain. But on that morning, as the mist still clung to the peaks and his fire cracked softly in the hearth, everything changed. There was a knock, soft, weak, like someone barely had the strength to lift their hand. He froze, coffee cup suspended mid-air. For a moment, he thought it must have been the wind. But then it came again, slower, more desperate. He stood in the stillness, heart suddenly hammering against the ribcage he'd spent a decade hardening. No one knew this place existed. No one was supposed to. He moved slowly, eyes flicking to the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Old instinct rose in him like smoke. His fingers brushed the grip, familiar and cold. He approached the door, his boots silent on the wooden floor, breath shallow, the kind you take when you know something's about to change. Through the window, a shadow slumped against the frame. Long black hair, torn fabric, blood, lots of it, a body, or close to becoming one. Thorne hesitated. The smart thing would be to let her go. Whoever she was, whatever brought her here, it wasn't his problem. That's how he'd survived this long, by staying out of things, by not caring, by not helping. But he didn't walk away. Something about the way she leaned, half standing, half falling, made it impossible, not out of compassion, out of something deeper, a quiet recognition that once he'd stood just like that, bleeding, alone, unwanted. He unlatched the door. She fell into his arms. He caught her. She was light, almost too light, like whatever strength she once had been left on the trail behind her. Her buckskin dress was soaked in crimson, clinging to skin that had lost its color. Her breathing came in shallow gasps. But even in her brokenness, her face held something fierce, something alive. Thorne should have turned away, should have left her there in the dust. Helping her meant questions, risk, worse attachment, and he'd sworn off all of that the day he disappeared into these mountains. But her heart beat against his chest, weak but steady. And for the first time in years, he remembered he had one, too. He closed the door behind them. If you were Thorne, what would you do? Would you save a stranger, knowing it might destroy the only peace you've ever known? Or would you close the door, let her die, and keep your secrets buried? Let me know in the comments. Because some choices echo far louder than any knock on a wooden door. Thorne laid her on the bed with more care than he thought himself capable of. The rough wool blanket barely cushioned her frame, and for a moment, he just stared. Blood had soaked through the seams of her dress, seeping into the fabric like ink. He'd seen wounds like this before, deep, angry slashes that told stories of violence, not accidents. He should have walked away. He knew it. Every survival instinct in him screamed to let her go, to step outside, close the door, and pretend none of this had happened. But he didn't move. He watched the slow rise and fall of her chest. She was still alive, barely. He moved into action, not with urgency but with method. Boiling water over the fire, tearing old shirts into bandages, pouring whiskey into a bowl for cleaning. His hands didn't shake. Not yet. That would come later. As he dipped a cloth into the hot water, her eyes open, dark brown, sharp, awake. They didn't flicker around the room in panic, as he might have expected. They locked onto his, calm and watchful, like she was cataloging him. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. Her voice was strained, laced with pain, but steady. Thorne froze. It had been years since someone had spoken to him like that, with clarity, with purpose. "What did you expect?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze swept over the room, the fire, the weapons, the walls lined with silence. "A ghost," she murmured. "The elders speak of a man who vanished into the mountains. They said grief made him into smoke." The words hit harder than they should have. Thorne didn't reply. He didn't have to. She saw it in his silence. "I am Ayana," she said after a pause, "daughter of Chief Nalnish." That name pulled something from the deepest parts of his memory. A legend, a warrior chief who had refused to bow, refused to kneel, refused to die quietly. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Her lips twitched. "I didn't come by choice." He leaned closer to examine the wound, peeling back the blood-soaked fabric. It was deep, a knife or a blade of some sort. Not clean, not careful. As he reached for the whiskey-soaked cloth, her hand shot out and caught his wrist. Her grip was weak but insistent. "Before you help me," she whispered, "you need to know. Helping me will bring death to your door. They are hunting me, and they will not ask questions." Thorne held her gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only warning, only truth. He could walk away now, let the consequences pass him by, but he didn't. "Why come here?" he asked. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I was fleeing, bleeding. And then, I saw smoke. I followed it. I thought I'd die on your doorstep." He looked down at her fingers, still wrapped around his wrist. Her skin was hot with fever. "You might still," he said. "Then let me die inside, not out there." Silence returned for a moment, the kind that presses against the chest. He reached for the cloth again, and this time, she let go. He dabbed gently, cleaning the wound. His touch was steady, but inside, a storm was building. "You've seen war," she said. He didn't respond. Felt it. Wore it. Carried it home. Still nothing. "You're not a hermit," she added. "You're a soldier who got tired of being one." Thorne looked at her, really looked. There was no accusation in her voice, only knowing, only recognition. "I lost everything," he said finally. Her breath caught, not from the pain, but from understanding. "I know that pain." And in that quiet moment, in a cabin meant to keep the world out, something cracked open between them. Maybe it wasn't healing, not yet, but it was the beginning. Have you ever met someone you never planned to help, but somehow they became the one person who saved something in you you thought was lost? If so, then maybe you understand Thorne. Maybe you've been him. The knock this time was not soft. It was loud, sharp, demanding. Thorne stood still, staring at the door like it had grown teeth. His rifle hung above the mantel, just an arm's reach away. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. They'd found her. Ayana, half-conscious, lay hidden behind the fireplace panel he'd built years ago in case of emergencies. A crawlspace meant for escaping, not for sheltering fugitives. But she was in no condition to run. Not now. Not yet. Another knock. Harder. A voice followed. "Open up. Territorial business." Thorne's jaw clenched. He took a steadying breath and stepped toward the door, masking the tension behind his eyes with the look of a man annoyed by an unexpected visit. He opened it slowly. 3 men stood outside, dust-covered, armed, and far too comfortable with violence. The one in the center had a lean frame, a crooked badge, and eyes like a snake sizing up prey. "Morning," Thorne said flatly. "Name's Deputy Marshal Clayton Briggs," the lead man said. "We're tracking an Apache fugitive. Blood trail leads right to your door." Thorne didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes dropped briefly to the porch. Drops of blood stained the wooden boards, vivid against the sun-bleached grain. "Apache?" Thorne said. "Haven't seen any." Briggs tilted his head. "Funny. You butcher deer out here?" "Occasionally." Briggs nodded toward the red-streaked steps. "Mighty big drops for a deer." Thorne folded his arms. "Arrow in the side. Thing ran half a mile before I brought it down. Took most of the morning dressing it. Mind if we take a look?" Every muscle in Thorne's body tensed, but he forced a shrug. "Make it quick." The 3 men stepped inside. Instantly, their eyes scanned the room, noting the basin of pink water on the table, the bloodied cloths, the rumpled bed. "Messy work," the broad one muttered, picking up a bandage. "Kicked me while I was cutting. Tore my arm." Thorne rolled up his sleeve just enough to show an old scar. Faded, but convincing in this light. The 3rd man stayed quiet. He moved around the cabin slowly, fingers brushing surfaces. He stopped at the hearth, knelt, ran a hand along the stones. His fingertip came away red. Briggs stepped closer. That deer bleed into your fireplace too?" Thorne didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the hidden panel, invisible behind stone and soot. Inside, Ayanna was silent. Still, but for how long? The broad man leaned in, pressing an ear to the wall, listening, and then it happened. Just a breath. A soft, involuntary inhale. So quiet it could have been missed, but it wasn't. The man's eyes lit up. "There," he whispered. "Behind this wall, something's breathing." Briggs's smile returned. Cold, triumphant. "Well, well," he said. "Looks like our hermit's been keeping secrets." He kept his gun pointed at Thorne as he turned to his men. "Open it." Thorne's pulse thundered. He had seconds now. Maybe less. He could keep lying, or he could reach for the rifle. Whatever choice he made would paint the rest of the day in blood. What would you do? Would you gamble everything on a lie? Or let the gun speak first? Let me know. Because one way or another, this cabin is about to remember what violence sounds like. Thorne didn't move. Briggs took another step toward the fireplace, gun still raised, confidence oozing from every motion. "You know," he said, casually glancing at Thorne, "I've been tracking wounded animals for 2 decades, and this don't smell like deer blood to me." The big man reached toward the stones, fingers brushing along the edge where the hidden panel met the wall. One push, and Ayanna would be exposed. One breath too loud, and it would all be over. Thorne's eyes never left them. His hand hovered just inches below the rifle mounted above the mantel. Briggs noticed. "I wouldn't," he warned. "3 of us. 1 of you. Ain't smart odds." Thorne's voice came quiet, steady, too calm. "Depends on the 3. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Something shifted in the air. The kind of stillness that comes right before lightning strikes. The bounty hunters exchanged uneasy glances. They had come expecting a scared hermit. What they saw now was something else. "You know what I think?" Briggs said, trying to hold control. "I think you've got a soft spot for bleeding Apache girls. And I think you forgot what side you're supposed to be on." Thorne didn't blink. "What side is that?" he asked. Briggs smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "The side that puts animals down when they bite." He turned to his men. "Tear this place apart. We're close." As they moved, Thorne spoke again. Quiet, measured. "You want to know why I live up here?" No one answered. 12 years ago, I was Captain Thorne Shepherd, 5th Cavalry. That name hit like a bullet. Briggs froze. The other 2 hesitated. Thorne stepped away from the mantel, now fully visible, hands still low, voice calm. "They called me the Ghost Captain. Not because I disappeared, because I made others disappear. Men like you, officers who sold out their own for profit, cowards in uniform." He took another step. "I hunted them. Every last one." Briggs scoffed, but his voice wavered. "You're lying. Check your records," Thorne said. "If you make it back to town." The tall man at the fireplace looked pale now. His hand slipped away from the stones. For a moment, no one moved. Then Briggs snapped, "Kill him." But Thorne was already moving. His hand shot to the knife on his belt. One motion, fast, clean. The blade flew through the air and hit Briggs square in the chest before he could lift his pistol. He staggered backward, dropped his weapon, and crumpled to the floor. The broad man pulled his revolver, but Thorne was faster. He lunged, twisting the gun away, then drove his elbow into the man's throat. Cartilage cracked. The man collapsed, gasping, eyes wide with panic. The third tried to fire. His shot rang out, splintering wood behind Thorne, but it was too late. Thorne closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, yanked the weapon free, and smashed the butt across the man's face. 30 seconds. 3 men. All down. The room fell into silence again. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that follows ruin. Blood spread across the floorboards. Bodies twitched, then stilled. The fire crackled, casting long shadows against the walls. Thorne stood over them, breath even, hands steady. The ghost captain had returned. Behind him, the hidden panel creaked open. Ayanna emerged, pale, holding her side, but standing. Her eyes scanned the room. She saw everything. The blood, the bodies, the man who had saved her. "So the stories were true," she whispered. Thorne turned to face her. There was no pride in his eyes, no triumph, only a quiet resignation. like a man who had dug up a version of himself he hoped had stayed buried. "I tried to forget that man," he said. "Thought if I stayed quiet long enough he'd disappear." Ayanna stepped closer. "But some things don't vanish," she said. "No," Thorne replied. "Sometimes they wait, for a reason to come back." He looked down at the dead men. "This was mine. If you've ever thought that people run because they're weak, maybe you haven't seen what they're running from, or what happens when they stop. Because sometimes a man doesn't fight to win. He fights because something inside him refuses to die quietly." Ayanna stepped out from the hiding space, her hand pressed gently to the wound along her ribs. She moved slowly but without fear. The scent of gunpowder still lingered in the cabin, mingling with the copper sting of blood. Her eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly on each body. There was no flinch, no gasp, only quiet understanding. Thorne watched her, not moving. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The truth was laid bare at her feet. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the room. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the cabin's small window. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ayanna's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "You didn't have to do that." Thorne leaned against the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "No, I didn't." She nodded. There was no gratitude spoken, but it was there. In the way she looked at him, in the way she didn't look away. He gestured to the bed. "You should sit." She ignored the offer and stepped toward the door instead, her movements careful but steady. Her eyes went to the mountains beyond, to the fading sky painted in amber and violet. "They'll send more," she said. "I know. You could still leave me, now that you've done your part." "I could." He didn't move. "But you won't." Thorne looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, he let the walls drop. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," he said. "I came here to disappear. I built this place to forget everything, who I was, what I'd done." Ayanna turned back toward him. "Did it work?" "For a while," he said, "until you knocked on my door." She gave a soft, almost imperceptible smile, a flicker of something gentle in a face that had seen too much war. "I was running," she admitted. "But not just from them, from what I saw, from what I couldn't save. The screams of children, the way the earth looked after fire had touched it. My people call it the silence of grief. When the land itself stops speaking." Thorne nodded slowly. His voice came softer now. "I know that silence." He reached up and ran a thumb over a faint scar near his collarbone. Not from a bullet, from a decision. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, not from fear, but from the weight of two people who had lost too much to name. Ayanna stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here." "No," Thorne said. "We can't. There are places deeper in the mountains, sacred places, where even the wind forgets your name. Will you show me?" She hesitated, just a beat, then nodded. "If you can keep up." He smiled, a real one this time. Faint, tired, but honest. "We leave before first light," he said. She moved toward the fire and sat, her hand still resting on her wound. Thorne joined her. They sat in silence as the flames danced. Not as strangers now, not as enemies. Two people, broken in different ways, bound by nothing but the understanding that sometimes the only way to survive is to walk into the unknown beside someone who carries a piece of the same darkness. Outside, the sky darkened. Stars began to bleed through the black. The mountain waited, patient and endless. Inside, the silence was no longer empty. Perhaps we all need someone to walk beside us, not to lead, not to follow, just to know we're not alone when the night comes. If you've ever felt like Thorne, like Ayanna, like the silence inside you was too big to fill, leave a single dot in the comments. I'll know you're there. The cabin stood quiet in the early light, its door left slightly ajar, swaying gently in the mountain breeze. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Inside, the hearth had gone cold, the floor still marked with the memory of blood and boots. The silence returned, but it no longer belonged to Thorne. He and Ayanna moved through the trees, just as dawn brushed the sky in shades of gold and silver. The path ahead was rough, unmarked, and silent. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Each step away from the cabin felt like shedding a skin, Thorne glanced back once, just once, and saw it for what it was, not a home, but a hiding place, a monument to the man he had tried to bury. Beside him, Ayanna walked with steady purpose, despite the pain in her side. Her eyes scanned the ridges ahead, the familiar rhythm of survival guiding her movements. She was not running now, she was choosing. The air grew thinner as they climbed. Pines whispered overhead, and the earth softened beneath their boots. Time passed differently in the high places, where no one watched, and the past could not chase so easily. At a narrow ledge overlooking a vast valley, they paused. From there, the world stretched in quiet layers, ridges folding into one another like ancient secrets, light filtering through mist. No roads, no towns, just silence. The good kind. Ayanna lowered herself onto a flat stone and looked out at the untouched land. "You asked why I came to your door," she said, voice low, thoughtful. Thorne didn't answer. He sat beside her and waited. "I didn't know then," she continued, "but I think I do now." She turned to him. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what was worth keeping." He didn't look away from the horizon, but he nodded. For 12 years, he had spoken only to himself, fought only his own memories. Now, he shared the weight of them with someone who understood, not because she wanted to, but because her path had been forged in the same fire. "They'll keep coming," he said. "Not just for you, for anyone who chooses to live free." Ayanna tilted her head. Her expression didn't change. "Then we keep moving." He looked at her now, really looked, and realized that something had changed in him. The man who once sought solitude now measured time by footsteps shared. The ghosts were still there, but they no longer had the last word. "I've spent years walking without a reason," he said. "Now I have one." They stood. The path ahead was steep, winding through forests older than the wars that had scarred them both. Somewhere beyond those ridges were caves, spoken of in stories, places that even soldiers feared to chase into, places sacred enough to begin again. They would disappear. Not in the way Thorne once dreamed. Not to be forgotten, but to become something new. Legends do not end. They evolve, and in the wilderness of a broken world, 2 of them had just begun. If you want to hear what happens when Thorne and Ayanna cross paths with a face from his past, a ghost he failed to bury, follow the trail. Subscribe and ring the bell, because their journey isn't over, and you're going to want to be there when the next chapter begins.